You're about 30 minutes into session 1, and already the party has split. The rogue is sneaking away to do rogue things, the barbarian's having an arm wrestling match in the local church, and the bard, well, we're not going to talk about what the bard's doing. You are totally up for player agency, but from a logistical standpoint, this game is a nightmare. Not to mention that none of the characters really trust each other or feel like a party. How are you supposed to get them to take on the same quest and eventually save the entire world together? How are you supposed to do this in the next session, let alone the entire campaign? One of the biggest problems with new campaigns or one-shots is that often the parties involved don't seem to need or want to stick together. Parties like to split, and they like to split way too early in the campaign, and not really for the right reasons. And it's because the characters don't feel like they need to stick together. They don't want to stick together. They don't have relationships. They don't trust each other, and often they don't really even fully like each other. It's because dungeon masters forget to create a coalescence event. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. I'm Justin Lewis, and over the last 3 years, we've been diving into every dungeon master topic possible, specifically to help you have better sessions without spending extra time, extra money, or wanting to kill your players. I want each of us to have the experience we always dreamed of when we first started playing D&D. Over these last 3 years, I've realized that a lot of people forget a very important element that can really break or make your adventuring party. So many times I've seen parties that travel together and stick together only because that's what the players know they should do. There's nothing worse than getting to a point in the story where you start to wonder why any of the characters are staying together because there's no real reason, right? They're not actually friends, but because you guys in real life are friends, or at least a party, they're sticking together. I've been there and I know what it feels like. You make choices about staying together and you know that otherwise the game kind of dissolves. And in those moments, the suspension of disbelief is just really ruined. It kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But see, that's where the Coalescence Event comes in. So what is a Coalescence Event? In short, the Coalescence Event is something that happens early on in the game, most likely in Session 1, that forces the party to stay together. It's supposed to coalesce the party into a party and make them actually into a real adventuring group. And a key aspect of the Coalescence Event is that it gets everyone in the group to willingly travel together in the same direction around each other for a certain period of time. And often, it gets them to do this until they at least start to like each other and have some sort of basis for an actual relationship. It doesn't truly force them to stay together as much as it aligns all of their natural motivations together. Having a coalescence event is very important because people do things for reasons. If they don't have a reason to do something, they're not going to do it. Dealing with people who have different personalities, as adventuring parties often do, is rarely easy or convenient. So, to get people to do the same thing, they have to have aligned motivations. Hence the coalescence event. Now let's talk about the characteristics of a coalescence event. While the idea sounds interesting and useful, and maybe even easy to some of you, in practice, it can get a little bit more complicated. A few times, I thought I had a good, strong coalescence event in some of my campaigns, only to realize that it actually didn't really work out how I wanted it to. For example, in my current personal campaign, I had a new player join the group, and I wanted to try and use this tactic to help him gel into the group. So all of the characters, they went to this speech in this public square for one of their allies. And during this speech, a man kind of hopped up on the stage, started summoning a bunch of monsters, and those monsters started killing and rampaging and attacking citizens, and it was mass pandemonium, right? It was exactly what I wanted it to be. My first mistake in this situation was thinking that anyone in the party would actually care at all about these no-name citizens that were getting killed by these monsters, right? The monsters would keep killing the citizens, and as they died, the party just kept on looking on, thinking, great, now more space is open up on the battlefield, I can move around more freely. Or, in the Necromancer's case, well, great, more bodies and zombies that I can bring back to life. My second mistake was not developing the emotional ties to the end state where the monsters were defeated. After the monsters were defeated, the party just kind of looked up at this newcomer who was there and had helped them and said, "Hey, thanks." And then they just got back to what they were doing before. And the newcomer also had his own business. During the fight, he kind of almost died, so he started running away. And I kind of had to cajole him back to the party. And there was no emotional ties, no connection. And this event, if you can call it that, was over so quick it didn't force any of them to stay together or get to know each other at all. Combat encounters alone are not coalescence events. Remember that. And needless to say, in this instance, my party did not gel. They did not coalesce sufficiently. Players want to feel drawn into a great story, and they don't always know exactly how to get that to happen. Instead, they know that most people in D&D are kind of closed off and not necessarily into meeting new people. And this is probably because most people are actually that way in real life. They're not actually open to meeting new people. I know I kind of struggle with that personally. So when characters meet each other, you as the DM need to give them a little push to become friends. And when crafting your Coalescence event, you need to remember the acronym LEAST, meaning at least cover these 5 areas, LEAST, least. Number 1, location limits. Number 2, emotional investment. Number 3, aligned goals. Number 4, superior priorities. And number 5, time sensitivity. If you want your party to stick together, they need these 5 things. They need a reason to care, a shared goal, urgent priorities, proximity, and a ticking clock. So before we get on to the actual methods of coalescence events, let's talk about these aspects. First, you need location limits. By necessity, your coalescence event has to bring the group together in close proximity. Whether for convenience or by force, the members of the party must start to rub shoulders, maybe even literally. As a DM, this means that you should encourage these brief moments of roleplay between PCs, even if that means that there's like an NPC in the middle, just kind of giving the roleplay a gentle nudge. Keeping the party near each other physically will help the characters start to build relationships, because one character will do something and another character will respond, and that will build their inter-party communication. Second thing you need, strong emotional investment. This is where I went wrong with my example I mentioned earlier. The coalescence event needs every character to be emotionally invested. It doesn't do to have the party imprisoned together if none of them care about escaping. The party should be emotionally invested, and something they care about should be on the line. So your first goal with the coalescence event is to get the players invested. Third thing you need is aligned goals. In whatever way, shape, or form, the coalescence event has to align the party's goals together, at least for some time. That's one of the reasons why they work, because it gets the party trying to accomplish the same thing. You might have a rogue, let's say, and a paladin. They're both, in this example, working together because they both want like a specific baron dead. The paladin might want to kill the baron because the baron wronged the village people of Aradia. Meanwhile, the rogue just wants to kill the baron to steal something. It doesn't matter. Both still want the baron dead, and they're both willing to work together, which is going to build their relationship. Who cares if they have different motivations? Fourth thing you need, superior priorities. For a coalescence event to work, it has to rise to the top of the priority list for every single one of the adventurers. It cannot seem unimportant. It can't seem like something only a couple of the party need to do, because they don't have the connection, they don't have the relationship capital that if one person wants to do something and another person doesn't, they'll stick together. It has to be something that involves the whole group, because at this point, they're not a group yet. It has to demand their attention. If one party member has to do the quest right now, but another feels like they don't want to do it and something else is more pressing, they'll split. The party will split. It's simple as that. Lastly, you need time sensitivity. For a coalescence event to work, it has to be time sensitive. This means that it must keep the party together for a certain amount of time and also must be pressing enough that the party has little time to prepare or prevent whatever is causing the party to stay together. You got to make sure they can't weasel out of being stuck together. All in all, it comes down to the relationship formula from the book The Like Switch. Proximity times frequency times duration times intensity. All of this builds relationships. The longer and more often you are around someone else and the more intense the emotions felt together, the higher the likelihood of forming a relationship. That's it. So now let's get into some of the most common examples that you might find when looking for coalescence events. Hopefully some of these might sound familiar, and these are just examples and simply need to be reskinned if you want to try and put it in your game. Of course, there are many more out there, and hopefully you can create some of your own. But I also want to let you know that I'm going to give a couple bonus methods after the show in the patron-only portion of the show. So if you're a patron, stay tuned for that. First one, shipwreck or skyship wreck. One of the most classic galvanizing events is the shipwreck. This essentially strands a group of individuals in a place that has inherent danger and in a location far removed from where they could find help elsewhere. In the Erois campaign from High Rollers D&D, they used this when their airship crashed into the lowlands, forcing the PCs to stick together to survive. You also see this to some extent in Jurassic Park. At first, we see Dr. Grant, Dr. Sattler, and Dr. Malcolm. They're just colleagues. And then the three doctors hop into an automated jeep and plunge into the park. Along the way, the power goes out and suddenly they're all running for their lives and trying to save children. That is a coalescence event. Danger forces them to work together. I like this method for starting campaigns because it easily helps to limit the scope of what you're doing, and also helps because putting low-level characters somewhere that's dangerous is actually really easy to do. Next up, we have imprisonment and capture. This one's simple. Have enemies capture or imprison the party. The party then has to band together to escape or take over the prison or do whatever else they're wanting to do. And this is going to give them enough time near each other to create some other form of relationship. In the Out of the Abyss module from Wizards of the Coast, this tactic is quite effective. You and your party all start as prisoners of the Drow, deep in the Underdark. You're all on the same footing, and you all have the same goal: escape. In the first Iron Man movie, we also see this tactic. Tony Stark is captured by the Ten Rings, where he meets Dr. Yinsen, who saves his life. And the two are co-prisoners and also work on their own project together and soon become friends. In our campaign, The Pact and Boon, rest in peace, our Dungeon Master Jake had all of us start as prisoners in Hell. We were pretty aligned by the fact that we all just wanted to get out. Jake also added it in method number 7 that we'll get to, which helped us go along the same way and work together, but we'll get to that in a sec. The captured and imprisoned method is a very simple but pretty strong method to use. Next, we have the jointly hired or commissioned coalescence event. This one's a little bit less direct, but still works fairly well. Have the same person hire everyone in the party to do the same job. Give them all the same tasks and incentivize them to make sure that it gets done. This works best when the task is not something that can be easily done. And it also works best when it takes more than just like a day. Because the key is to make the party members stick together and have shared challenges along the way, as well as some important downtime together, because that allows them to get to know each other. A super simple way to do this is using a caravan. Have a merchant hire the party to protect a caravan while it goes to a bigger city, and there you can also have some other plot point happen. And it's a very easy way to get things started in a very slow-moving, introducing you to the campaign way, but you can also have lots of things go wrong along the way. Another trick you can use with this is you can have the caravan owner be a villain that eventually betrays the party. Very similar, but also very effective. Next is under attack. This one's simple. You just have a place where all the PCs are, and it comes under attack. Simple. The attackers don't care who they are attacking, and therefore, or maybe they do, but what you need to make sure happens is all the PCs are lumped into the same bucket, that of prey, they are being attacked. This is a very easy coalescence event for low-level parties because they're low level. If the party is, let's say, in a village, then that village comes under attack from a goblin horde. Boom. A word of caution on this, however. If you are hoping that the party is going to, for some reason, care about the townsfolk or the other people that are there with them, you got to think again. That means you can't rely on their good nature to bind them together as a group. And instead, they all need to be collectively threatened, putting all of them with their backs against the same wall. If the party is threatened, though, they might just turn tail and run, right? In different directions. That's exactly what we don't want to have happen. So, to give it even more oomph, we want to give them more reason to stick together. Threaten the party, but also threaten something that each of them care about. So that way, even more, they are aligned in stopping the threat. If they do try to run, you can just box them in with enemy forces or capture them and then go back to method 2 of capture and imprisonment. Very simple. Regardless how you do it, the threat has to seem real and imminent and demand the party's attention. Next, we have the common enemy. Making the characters all have a common enemy is a great way to get the party aligned, but it can be fairly difficult. For this one to work, everyone has to really hate the enemy. If only some of the party hate the enemy, it's not going to work. This one's also pretty difficult because you have to show how hateable the enemy is, which means you'll have to work them into the backstory of every character in some sort of satisfying way, or do something very early in the campaign that shows why the party should hate them. Remember that emotional investment thing I was talking about earlier? That's what I'm talking about. They have to feel the emotions in real life. It's got to be real. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, both Snape and Draco do things very early on to antagonize Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and this prevents any relationship from forming between Draco and the heroes and Snape and the heroes, but it also, in a weird way, cements the relationship between the three heroes. Also, in the military, I've often heard that what cements a group of recruits or a squad together during basic training is really just this deep fear and animosity toward their drill sergeant. I mean, animosity in the sense of this person is yelling at us and making us do really hard stuff all the time kind of a way, if you get what I mean. The dislike towards this common enemy has to be real and actionable, otherwise the party's not going to bite. You can have the enemy be some sort of organization or kind of a conglomerate of enemies, but the only thing that matters is really that the party feels a threat and the sense of us versus them in an actionable way. The next Coalescence event is being lost, and it might be one of the easiest ones, to be honest. Or it could be one of the most difficult ones, depending on the level of the party and the experience of your players when you start the game. Simply put, you just make the party lost. And a great example of this is actually Lost, the TV show, which I guess actually also qualifies as being shipwrecked or whatever, but you get the idea. All you got to do is make sure each party member is lost in the same general location together, and they find each other, and they all want to get lost. Simple. And bonus points if the party is lost and also worried about some sort of danger together. Having the party members become lost in a desert only to meet each other at an oasis could be a really cool opening to a campaign, especially if they didn't know how they got there in the first place. Or maybe they do. The difficulty arises when you start to think up logical reasons why each member becomes lost. If you're going to use this method, it's going to work best with another method joined to it, right? Like maybe one person got lost because they were with a caravan, they were hired to do something, and then they got lost. But you need to make sure that there's logical reasons why they are in that location in the first place and why they got lost. One obvious requirement of this method is that it has to happen far away from a place where they can find help, far away from a place that they're familiar with, which means they have to have a reason why they're there and why they left the familiar in the first place. You could try this in a city, but I feel like that might be a little bit too difficult because there are so many other variables that would naturally act upon the heroes before the heroes can possibly meet each other and strike up a relationship. Remember, the goal here is to get the heroes all on the same footing and wanting the same thing. So if one party member isn't necessarily lost while the rest are, this won't really work that well. I suppose you could have one of them be kind of like a guide, like a national parks forest guide, I guess, and leading the party out to safety. But in that case, they would also need to be motivated. The party would need to offer them something, or they would have to have a reason to get the party safely there. One of the less powerful methods, I think, for coalescing your party together is to give them all a common ally. Simply put, in this case, all members of the party know and trust someone, or at least consider them their ally, and they're the sort of commonality between the group. If the group doesn't trust each other, they at least have this external common ally that they can rely on and trust. And this method can be pretty good for political intrigue or social games where you aren't always necessarily certain who you trust, but at least you know that this one guy, yeah, you can trust him. If you do use this method, you got to make sure that the trust is there for each party member. And again, that means that you need to go back to the backstories and spend time and energy writing emotionally gripping reasons why they trust this ally. Or add something in early into the campaign that builds that trust. But then again, I guess you could do the same thing with the party members themselves. One thing I will say is you should generally try to avoid having this common ally betray the party at some point, because that's going to make it much more difficult to use this method with any of your games in the future. Your players are not only just playing the immediate campaign, but they're essentially playing you, right? They're learning your rules and how you work, and when you do things over and over, they're going to catch those, and it's going to kind of ruin some things if you do it too often. D&D players already have trust issues for some reason, and adding betrayal to the mix can really throw them off, so do that strategically, if at all. One other aspect of this method is that the common ally does have to show up pretty early in the game in order to use their emotional pull on the characters. Usually this happens by giving them a quest or giving them something to do, right? Or they're just in danger, right? Princess Peach always needs saving, except not always. I guess it's more a trope, a stereotype. Look at me, just stereotyping all the princesses. I'm so bad. Anyways. Yeah, so just as long as the common ally shows up early and gives the party something to do, kind of bringing them together, it can work perfectly fine. If the party doesn't have a common ally, you can give them a common mission. This one might be a little bit hard to pull off too, but sometimes it just happens in piecemeal. It's going to take some time. A great example of this in action is the anime and manga Demon Slayer. Tanjiro Kamado hasn't met every Demon Slayer out there, right? But whenever he does, he and that individual know that they're on the same team because they're both part of the Demon Slayer Corps. All the members of the Demon Slayer Corps wear a uniform that identifies them as members of the Corps. They are on the same team, right? Technically, the Crusades could be looked at in the same manner. Give all of the members of the party the same mission. They don't need to be regimented like the Demon Slayer Corps, the Crusades, or whatnot, but having them aligned with the same mission already could be enough just to get started. For example, you could have all of them have the common goal of bringing down the cult of Tiamat for some reason, right? Then throwing some cultists at them at the beginning can be a pretty powerful way to get them to work together because, oh, I hate these guys. I want to get rid of them. You hate them too. Let's be friends. Another great example is in Baldur's Gate. Also, sorry if you can hear my kid in the background, but you're welcome because he's a delight. Anyways, back to Baldur's Gate. It's a great example of the common mission because you and basically every other party member that you meet at the beginning has this mind flayer tadpole in your head, and you're all at risk of turning into a mind flayer. That's a pretty strong common mission, right? Everyone kind of bands together because you're like, I don't want to be a mind flayer, and so let's work together and travel together and figure out how to not be mind flayers, right? Very simple, common mission. The last method I'm going to mention today before I finish the episode, and if you're a patron of ours, you can get some bonus content after the show, but the last one I'm going to mention for everyone else is just to have all of your party members traveling together. By traveling together, they're going to be forced to rub shoulders naturally, get to know each other, and face some of the same dangers along the way. Caravans are really a nice way to do this. And as are voyages on ships, right? Think about cruise ships. You often meet people on cruise ships because you're stuck together for a while. I have heritage of pioneers crossing the United States, coming to Utah. A lot of people probably met each other while crossing in groups, although I think in that case they were probably more you know the groups a little bit as you're going, but regardless, you know what I'm talking about. Even Star Wars A New Hope kind of takes advantage of this, right? Obi-Wan hires Han and Chewie to take him and Luke off of Tatooine. And from that moment, they're sort of stuck together for some time. And you can see there's a scene where Han is watching Luke do some Jedi training and their relationship starts to blossom. Then, obviously, they get captured and we go back to, method number 2. But in D&D, this can be simple as, hey, I need to go to this town and I'm walking down this road. Wow, you're walking down this road too. Do you mind if we walk together for some time because it's safer to walk in a group? These coalescence events don't necessarily need to be complicated. And you can do them really at your leisure, but they do need to be powerful. They need to be emotionally driving. They need to be gripping. So there you have it. You have 9 coalescence events that you can get started with. So to recap, we have a shipwreck, capture and imprisonment, jointly hired or being commissioned, under attack, common enemy, being lost, having a common ally, a common mission, or traveling together. And like I said, if you're a patron of ours, you can find a version of this episode with bonus coalescence events that are coming up in just a second. But I hope that this episode has helped you think of ways to get your party to band together and really be a party. With a strong coalescence event, the role play within the party follows just naturally. And the party does cement together without having to contrive reasons to face danger together. And you want to know something? Here's a secret about coalescence events and forming a group into a real party. If you don't have them, your party might be at risk of struggling to stay together through the entire campaign, which can actually make the game a little bit less fun. So if you want to make sure the games are fun and parties stick together because, well, it just makes sense, and honestly, they have relationships, then you should add in a coalescence event. Here's another secret about coalescence events. The best ones involve more than one method. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, right, going back to my previous example, Harry, Ron, and Hermione meet each other while traveling together on a train, going to the same destination. In the Fellowship of the Ring, Aragorn and the hobbits become a party because they have a common ally, Gandalf, who gives them a common mission against a common enemy, Sauron. To make the most out of your coalescence event, use them together. Use more than one. And here's one final secret to share with you. You can use coalescence events often throughout your campaign. Having these sort of events can help your characters continually bond together and remain a strong party. We would love to hear which ones you used. And if you found some that I didn't even mention, I'd love to hear those. So reach out to us on Instagram, Discord, TikTok, whichever it is, and maybe we'll feature your tip on the show. Keep GMing and perfecting your craft. You are doing awesome, and I hope you realize that. In parting, I do want to leave you with one challenge. Here is my challenge. The next time you start a campaign, don't leave the party's cohesion up to chance. Create a coalescence event to build the party. See just how much stronger the party is and the game is overall. We'll be back next time with another handcrafted episode just for you. Until then, my friends, let's go ahead and roll initiative.